Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. In front of me here, we have a pretty small box, and inside of it is an iPhone 5C. Now, this is running its original version of iOS, which happens to be iOS 8. Now, as most of you probably know, iOS 8 is not what shipped with the 5C. But let's get this opened up and let me tell you why this is actually an original software for this device. Let's begin. Okay, here's the iPhone. It is in the original box, although it's not sealed, but it does actually appear to still have, it either has a screen protector, which I think is what it is. I thought maybe it still had the plastic seal on it from the factory, but that's not the case. But what I want to draw your attention to here is the fact that this is an 8 GB model. Now, in 2013, when the iPhone 5S was launched, the 5C launched alongside it, and they were both on iOS 7. Now, the following year, Apple reduced the price of the 5C to $0 with a new contract. So it was the budget version when it came out in 2013, starting at $100, where the 5S was $200. And the following year, when the iPhone 6 launched, the 5C dropped to the lowest tier, free iPhone model with a 2-year contract. And with that, they decreased the capacity down to 8 GB. So the 8 GB iPhone 5C could only be had in 2014. You could not buy this phone in 2013. That means the 8 GB model never shipped with iOS 7. It only ever came with iOS 8. And based on the listing photos, I think that's what we have. So let me get this thing plugged into power. We'll let it charge a little bit. And once it is charged, we'll see which version of iOS we have. And here we go. The 5C has just enough power to turn on, and we're met with the slide to unlock. So that indicates this is at least iOS 7, because iOS 7, 8, and 9 all had the slide to unlock. So hopefully we're not met with a password. And we're not. We're onto the home screen. Let's go inside of settings and see which version this has. So this is 8.1, and of course this is an 8 GB model, although the only amount you get to use is 4.8 GB. That's hardly anything. So before we go and talk about the software here, let's look at the outside of the phone and see what kind of condition it's in. This one looks to be in pretty good shape, although there is some scratching here on the plastic. And let's unplug this for now. I'm not seeing any significant damage. Maybe this corner here is where the worst of it is. But the rest of the device looks really clean. It has a screen protector on the front, so it's hard to get a feel for just how good of condition the actual glass of the iPhone is. But let's take a moment just to admire, in my opinion, how nice this iPhone looks. Now, the 5C launched in several different colors, and I think my personal favorite is actually this white color. It's either the white or the blue that it launched with, and it just looks so nice. You have the black Apple logo there, which is complemented by the black text of the iPhone, and we have black lightning port as well as a black headphone jack. So not too common on iPhones to actually have a painted lightning port and headphone jack. We'll take a look at this 5S, for example. The inside of that is just the metal. So there's a metal frame there, metal frame here. And on the 5C, it is plastic, which is corresponding to the color of the iPhone. So I think it looks really nice, even though it is a plastic back, not glass or metal. It feels really nice to hold in the hand. It's nice and sturdy, and it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't creak when you try to bend it. And it is really well done. The volume buttons are plastic as well. So is the rocker switch. And I think the little orange accent inside there complements the phone really well. You can actually see that the glass is lifted a tiny bit above the display. I know it has a screen protector on, but if you look here at this edge, you can see that black bezel that goes around the glass of the iPhone is actually a little bit higher than the phone itself. And that is actually the case with the 5S as well. If we hold it at the same angle, you can see that the metal ends right here, and then we have a little lip of white plastic, which surrounds the outside of the glass. So if these phones were to take a direct hit on the ground like that, the impact is going 100% into the glass of the display, and that ultimately is going to lead to some cracks. Fortunately for us, this 5C is in great condition. Now let's talk about iOS 8. And I better get it plugged in before it dies. So as I said before, the 5C originally launched with iOS 7 for the 16 and 32 gigabyte models that were released alongside the 5S in 2013. This 8 gigabyte model was released a year later alongside the iPhone 6. And it got iOS 8, which is what we have here. So it's kind of similar to if you had an iPod Touch 4th generation. If you had a white model, the oldest iOS you could get for that would be iOS 5, because even though it's a 4th gen, the white model was updated in 2011 and got the features associated with iCloud, and it got the iOS 5 update. So that's kind of a similar story here with the 8 gigabyte iPhone 5C, which was launched a year later. And iOS 8 feels really smooth on this device. Keep in mind that this is the same processor and the same internal specs as an iPhone 5. So it has the A6 chip along with 1 gigabyte of RAM, and it actually has the same 8 megapixel camera on the back and a 1.2 megapixel camera on the front. The only difference being the outsides and the storage capacities, whereas the iPhone 5 would get 16, 32, and 64 gigabytes. The 5C would start with 16 and 32, and then a year later would get the 8 gigabyte model. Now, iOS 8 introduced Apple Music, but I don't think that was available until one of the later iterations of iOS 8. So I don't think this device, which is on 8.1, has that. There weren't too many changes in iOS 8. Some of the visual changes include a passbook icon, which now has 4 rows, whereas on iOS 7, it only has 3. Let's see if we can find some other differences. The Health app appears to be an iOS 8 exclusive, and perhaps the Podcast app is new as well. And the Tips app is new. Voice memos looks the same. Contacts looks the same. Calculator looks the same. Lots of similarities here. So in iOS 8, we had the introduction of the timer up here, so you could do a countdown and take photos that way. iOS 7 did not have that. But apart from that, not much changed inside the camera app. Multitasking stayed the same, although I think there were some versions. Oh yeah, this is actually one. Your most recent contacts would actually appear up here. That was very short-lived, and I think it was removed in iOS 9. So there you have it. The iPhone 5C is kind of overlooked quite a bit for being rather an ugly duckling of the iPhones, but I think it's aged very well, and if you can find a really clean example like I have here, where the plastic is in great condition, I think you'll be surprised with how nice this iPhone feels and how it looks. There are lots of different colors available. If I remember off the top of my head, you could get white, blue, green, yellow, and a reddish pink. Those were the colors. I personally think a black iPhone 5C would have looked amazing. So if you imagine that the color this Apple logo is, if the entire back was that, and then the text was white, I think that would have looked phenomenal. And then maybe you could leave the buttons white as well. I don't know. I think that would have looked amazing. I'm sure you can get a custom backplate and maybe that's a project for another day. But I hope you guys have had a good time checking out this iPhone 5C running iOS 8, technically the original software, although I think a 5C on iOS 7 is a little bit more interesting. Real quick before we go, we've got the Apple EarPods in their plastic case, which were sold starting with the iPhone 5. Later on, Apple would remove this plastic case and they would ship these inside of a little cardboard package to cut down on costs as well as promote environmental friendliness. But this case is actually pretty nice because you can wrap your EarPods back up in here and securely store them while you travel. It's actually pretty neat. And no other accessories in the box, but it is pretty neat that we got the original box along with this little holder that we can put the iPhone in. Just like that. Snaps in place, and then we can put it back inside the box and seal it up. So there you have it. That's been a look at this iPhone 5C, 8GB model, running iOS 8.1. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope to see you in another video.